Welcome, everyone. This is the Shades of Life conversation. I'm Tenneson. I'm here with Kathy and Jerry and Janet. And Janet just invited me to go right on in, babe. So I'm going to jump in with a little something, something today. Um, as you, Jerry and Kathy, have noted and named, today it's my birthday. So I'm coming in on a birthday uh, appearance. And that feels kind of fun, actually. I As much as possible, I didn't want to put a bunch of regular things today, so I was a little selective about that. And
Ah,
this call was one of the things that I felt selectively yes about.
sweet.
So yay. So I'm going to name a topic, and in the simple way that we so often do, I'm going to name a topic that has interest to me and try to say a little bit about it, context, and maybe a bit of story that goes with it, and then invite each of us to reflect as we do on the topic, both to what I'm saying and how you relate to it personally, and then we'll follow it wherever we decide to go, and when we're done, we're done. Cool beans.
Sounds good to me.
I did get a birthday card, by the way, earlier this week from Sarah McDougall, as in Circle
Oh,
K Sarah.
hmm.
And uh, it's one of those cards where I think she just couldn't resist it. So it's your birthday. The inside it says cool beans, which is a phrase that I like to use a fair amount. So I find myself using. Um, okay, here's the topic. I am wondering about developmental phases of life. I speak that as a human, I speak that as a man. And to put some extra tone in that, without uh, without going too far into these times, I hate that as a reference. It feels so vague and yet it still feels useful. It seems to me that there's a developmental imperative or a developmental necessity. In other words, how we're growing as human beings, how we're growing as a species. Some context on this is I find myself thinking this a lot about being a man. And yes, I'm in a birthday turning 63, am 63 today. And as you folks know, I keep coming back to this topic. Like it's one version of it is like, what does it mean to be this age now? And what's required or what's helpful or what's invited? And some of my best framing around that is just that I'm not 40, I'm not 20, I'm not 80. I notice that it feels to me like there is a natural evolution of who we are, and there's some conscious evolution of who we are also. I'm really interested in that, and it's a genuine question. I feel like as a 63-year-old, I guess I'm growing into that number today. There's a few things I know, and there's a few things that I'm learned, and there's a few things that I know that I stand for. There's a few things that I've learned and I still shy away from also. But it seems to me, like I'm trying to find the sort of very pregnant premise in all of this. Um, and I'm letting myself say it. I think we're called as human beings to be a different kind of species today than we were 20 years ago. And I would I feel like I need to explore what that means. It's deeply personal, but I also think it's a broadly communal thing. There's a different kind of consciousness. There's a different kind of maturity. There's a and maybe as I say that, I feel like, well, there's lots of eras that require such a transition. And I suppose I'm trying to be conscious as as much as I can in this version of that transition. And yeah, so deeply personal. And oh gosh, I think it's so much more than the personal here. I know we have some insights and stories and wisdom and all of that kind of stuff here. I'm offering that as a starting point and see where we go with it. Jump in, please.
Well, I have two things. Like right
Mm.
away, we said something about interesting times, and it popped into my head. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Yeah.
And I think I feel that so viscerally at times. And as we've talked about before on Shades of Life, it's they support each other, they lift each other up. If you have the best, you also have the worst, and if you have the worst, then the best is also there. So that kind of, it just popped into my head. And you use the word pregnant premise, and I've found that it just caught my attention. I'm not sure why, but I'm like, that's kind of interesting. um and of course, pregnancy associated with fertility, and fertility being any number of interpretations, like the fertility of ideas that we
Mm.
might create here in this Shades of Life space. Anyway, so those are the first quick couple of things that popped in. And then
Mm.
I am intrigued by the notion of natural evolution and conscious evolution, because natural evolution is going to happen regardless, and conscious evolution usually requires some level of intentionality or attention being paid to it. And are we called to be a different human than 30 years ago? I have a resounding yes to that
Mm.
question, coming from my own growth and development over the years, but then with my kids and now with my grandkids. And we, even yesterday, I was in conversation with someone about neurodiversity, and about like the increasing prevalence of allergies and gluten issues and things like that. So there are, and of course, there's artificial intelligence, as we've been diving into. So I think that we are required to be a different human now, or we're being asked to be. We're not required to be. We can be anything that we want to be, because we have agency and we have choice. Uh, well,
Mm.
I've been listening to a podcast series um, called Reverent Reverent something or other. Um, and she's a psychoanalyst and does spiritual work and all of this stuff. And I'm finding it very fascinating. So the current podcast episode that I'm listening to is around intergenerational things, starting with like intergenerational trauma, how that's carried in the body, and in the like the DNA and the memory, even if we haven't directly experienced it. But then so is intergenerational healing. And I think about intergenerational healing a lot. Quite a number of years ago, taking part in a shamanic thing. This notion that when we heal ourselves, we heal back and forth along the lineages, or
Mm.
past and future, is a thing that has really
Mm.
stuck with me viscerally for a long time. So this notion of intergenerational healing, and what we do for ourselves, we also do for our families and for society at large. And, particularly being also in my 60s, also 63, actually. Um,
Hey,
right.
thanks for the welcome, Kathy.
Welcome to that year. Uh, the legacy that we leave, I think that I leave for my grandchildren, isn't just about what my interactions are with them right now, but it is about what is the work I'm doing for myself that will directly and indirectly affect them and their lineage. Because today in particular, when I was listening to the podcast, that breaking the cycle thing, and I'm sure we all have intergenerational trauma in our family to one degree or another. So that's all that popped for me, Tenneson, when you started us off. Thank you for that great segue into today's Shades of Life.
Love it. I'm tempted to be a smartass young person here and say, well, let's hear what the older people think. I want some of that wisdom, seriously.
Well, I can go for a bit.
Hmm.
The first thing that kind of emerged for me in listening to you in a note down here about phases is physicality.
Hmm.
And so I moved into my house that I'm in here 7 years ago. And in those first few years, I built brick flower beds around the house. I built stone flower beds around the house. I planted trees. I don't think I could do any of that anymore. I think I just physically couldn't do it anymore. Um, and I'm 74, going to have knee replacement surgery in a few weeks. I just, that's just not going to happen in that same way. And I sit around here now and then and go, how fast that change took place.
Mhm.
Because, as Kathy knows, I've always been physically active, ride bike and go to the gym and everything. But everything, that whole physicality is surprising. The phase of it in how sort of rapidly it changed. So I just note that and set it over there. Because I still will go ride my bike. I still go to the gym and lift weights. I still do everything I can, but I have to approach it all differently, you know, in a different way. So that was one thing that kind of just popped right away, and it's been on my mind because of the upcoming surgery and everything too. Anyway, um, but the other thing that I
Mm.
just kind of emerged for me was the word I wrote was choices, and
Mm.
and then I thought about it from my grandparents' perspective, my dad's perspective, and my perspective. Choices on different things. And so one note I made was around technology. So my grandfather, Gordon, um, was not a big technology adapter. He put a sprayer on his back and walked his field and hand sprayed weeds.
Mm.
Didn't have a thing on his tractor. He and I did this with him more than I cared to want to do. Walked his field with a bucket and picked rocks. And we would spend a whole day out there picking rocks and dumping into a trailer and then taking them to the rock pile to unload the trailer, all by hand, everything. And even, I mean, it wasn't a financial thing. It was his perspective on, do I really need these other fancy tools? Do I need this or that? Even the combine was a tractor pulled combine. My grandma drove the grain truck. It was all and they were very self-sufficient in their lifestyle, raised almost all their own food and everything. Um, and then I think about my dad and how astounded he was by the rapid advancement in farm technology. The combine that my cousin was using was like getting into an airplane cockpit. I mean, the advancement in monitoring and everything. And I don't think my dad would have adapted real well to all of that.
Mm.
His adoption of a computer was to play card games on it.
Mm.
Um, but on the other hand, both my dad and his dad were very skilled woodworkers, and they used the most up-to-date, modern, skilled woodworking tools that you could have out there. So it's interesting, these kinds of things. Whereas for me, I'm kind of
Mm.
in a different technology mindset. I'm fascinated by it and comfortable with it and play around with it, as much as somebody my age would do. Lately it's been around AI. So there are these different sort of technology choices that are intergenerational that you were kind of referring to, Tenneson and Kathy. I know that my two grandparents, my mom's parents and my dad's parents, loved being grandparents. They absolutely loved it, and my parents loved being grandparents, and I do too. So there's this. So I'm fortunate in that regard. Um, the other kind of thing. So that's a phase of life, being a grandparent, and how do you step into it? And I think I've stepped into it with joy, like I grew up around that. Um, and then just a notion of around habits. So my one second and last thing is I rarely watch television. And if it's because I want to watch a movie, so I stay awake instead of fall asleep. I read. I'm just an avid reader, and that's a habit of my life. And so it's also means that my kids are asking me about this, that, and the other TV program, and I have no idea what they're talking about. But or Kathy too, for that matter, times.
Oh, I don't ask anymore.
Right, that's because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Nice adaptive behavior.
Yeah. And then the last little thing I just want to raise up again, and maybe without if it's exploring or not, is this issue about men.
Mhm.
There's a lot of chatter out there about what's happening with young men today. And it feels to me that a lot of it's just not very positive about young men, and that concerns me because we live into the stories we tell, the descriptions we offer, and there's a lot of blaming that seems to be going on, and some of that I find quite troubling. But the one thing that I find sort of accurate out there is that it's where's our relational culture, and so have we become in some ways, and particularly young, more sort of individualistic, and maybe that's the right word, maybe not. And when we lose relational culture, and I don't mean destructive relational culture, I mean, learning culture, friendship culture, community culture. If I feel like that's the diminished part, and it may be for young women too. Because I'm a man, that I'm sort of drawn to that, and because I have two grandsons, and so I'm drawn to that conversation. But yeah, I have this. Are we in a phase where there's some breakdown of relational culture? So I'm complete.
Juicy.
Well, as the old woman of the group, I guess it's my turn. Um, I turned 75 this year and was very much aware of what Jerry's talking about, the changes in the physicality and the surprise of it. Why was I surprised? But it was like, yesterday I could do this and now I can't, or I can do it halfway and it takes me 3 times as long. So it's that reshifting of how I think I interact in the world. Your use of the word choices really struck me because I'm in a phase of being very intentional about what I choose to do. I've chosen I don't watch any news. I'll get snippets of it, and sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm going to have to Google it. Or I'll get a message from one of the kids and I have no idea because I'm not in their world. But that notion of choices led me, and I am currently reading Meg Wheatley's book, Who Do We Choose to Be? The most important thing that I've found so far is her description of how every single civilization has fallen apart after 10 generations, which works out to roughly 250 years. And in the United States, we're coming up on 250 years. We're at 249. And the descriptions are eerily similar to the time we're in. So I'm trying to stand in two worlds, in that there are amazing things happening now, and there are really shitty things happening now. And I can choose which one I'm going to give more attention to. And I see it particularly in the young men in my life who are managing, despite everything that's happening, to be the kind of men that I can be proud of. I have a nephew who's probably 22. He just graduated from college, got his first job through connections at college and his father. And he's doing environmental work in the state of Virginia, which is coming through grants. So even as we hear about all these things are falling apart, there are still pockets where people are able to do what I consider good work. And I need to hang on to those stories of good work because I'm swimming in the ones that are the opposite. And then I see my grandson, who I think Luke is 30, has just coming out of reading and his intense passion for social justice. He's become a big brother to a 12-year-old boy that has no man in his life. So I'm choosing to hold on to those stories. And strangely to me, also investigating what has gone on intergenerationally in my family in the past, because it's part of who made me who I am. And so it's like a bunch of swirling different little dervishes around how I think and how I operate right now. Just a bit of being the rebel of being an artist, because I think that's we forget about beauty and we forget about poetry, and those are historically, they've been where the radicals live, and you don't have to be big and showy. So I'm trying to be radical in little ways. Hopefully somebody notices. If not, that's okay. It's worth it. So yes, now I'm complete.
So one of the things that I think is pretty cool on that, Janet, is you just keep doing. And I imagine that you've grown into yourself more layers, or maybe peeled a few layers away also, that just have you doing what you do, and maybe finding even more comfort in that skin, standing outside of the norms of what people, are supposed to do or say you're supposed to do. I think all of that fits back into this question that I hadn't really thought of until this morning around a developmental imperative, a required shift, a required evolution. And for me, when I think such things, they tend to show up with a physical or physiological aspect, an emotional aspect, a spiritual aspect, some psychology in there somewhere. They all show up, and maybe it's a 250-year cycle like you're referencing, Janet, excuse me. And I wonder if it's like that cycle with a new twist. So I'm going to try to stir again. I feel like we're sharing the spoon here a little bit. I notice, so I participated in a group the last 2 Mondays with an older friend who I'm aware of, again, in sort of the mid to late 70s range. And he and I have stayed in contact, and he said, you should come check this out. So I did. And when I show up for groups like that, new groups, I expected it to be fairly conversational, dialogic, yay. So the things that I look for and appreciate. Um, I'm not really hunting for new groups to be in. Like, I don't feel like I'm starving of those groups if only they existed. For me, it's more like, oh gosh, there's a lot. And you choose, for me, I choose the 2 or 3 or maybe 4 that I can show up for. Well, with this particular group, I showed up and it was kind of an older crowd. Zoom screen, quick measure. It's like, oh, yeah, pretty old, pretty silver. Got some old, got some silver in this group. And I really liked it. So did that surprise me? I'm thinking out loud. Well, I guess it did. It surprised me a little bit. And it opened up something for me because, I show up in a lot of places where we value the diversity, we value the cross generations, we create formats for those groups to interact and share and dream, all of that. Something in me needed those olders. I wanted those olders, and I wanted those olders to be smart olders or comprehensive olders, or, yep, could use the elder term here also. That was a bit surprising to me. It was revealing to me. Like, I think it showed me a place in myself where I feel like sometimes I'm the older, right? I'm the one that's showing up in that spot. And I still have this need to have some conscious olders around me. That sounds like well, I'm not going to apologize for saying it that way. That was a real discovery. A second thing for me that links this back is I have some of those younger men in my life, including my own boys, my sons who are 28 and 20 now. I've got a stepson who's 22, and a few other similarly aged men who I seem to be in some contact with. And when I watch those young men close into my life, I see impressive things and also some like real room to grow things. And I'll fast forward the story for a minute because sometimes there's a charge in that. And when I feel a charge, I usually come back to me. Like, what is it in me that is unresolved that I'm seeing in them? And this is one of those pieces with those boys, with those men, is sometimes, oh shit, I don't know how to say this. Well, just say it. There's an aspect of those young men that are still 8-year-old boys.
Mm-hmm.
There's an aspect in me, 63-year-old Tenneson today, that is still an 8-year-old boy. There's an aspect in those young men that are 15-year-old teenagers. Bravado, exaggeration. Whoa. There's an aspect of me that is 15 years old in that bravado and exaggeration. And then as I move up to the actual age of these younger men, what's impressive is when they are in their age relevant, oh boy, that's kind of snooty, but I'm still going to say it, age relevant behavior. Like, to see a 20-something-year-old who's curious about life, learning stuff, learning how to do things impressively, that's really cool. Now, I could take that further because developmental scales are fun. There is a young man, there's a middle-aged man, there's an old man, and then maybe there's an old man too. So I'm, simplifying all of those kinds of things. It's true in women also. And I'm just going to let myself jump to the scale that is crone. I feel like I've got some women that I'm hanging out with pretty regularly these days that carry crone energy. The great, it doesn't feel like a great aha learning, and yet it still lands that way in me, is it seems to me one of the grand works is to continue to integrate all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a young boy, yep, good, cool, honor it, welcome it. There's a bravado teen, good, cool, welcome it, honor it. And also make some choices, conscious choices about the age that I live in. Now, all of that to say, there's a part of me, let's see, I don't want to hedge it. I'm struggling to make the shift from the deeply ingrained productivity narrative, I'll just let myself name it this way. And some people, Janet, also, maybe for other reasons, would totally laugh to hear me saying that. Like, Tenneson, you let go of productivity a long time ago, or the scale of productivity that much of the world works on, right? I am struggling to move from that productivity narrative into whatever follows it. And maybe it's the deeply grounded story or the great witness you just see. I have so many young men, yes, but younger people also, where I feel like my job is to cheer for them. Oh gosh, do your learning, develop your gifts, do your good things, be a voice that offers some encouragement, some of that kind of energy. But what I wanted to name is that shift. Okay, wait. So let me stir it back into Jerry where you went also, because the physicality of building those brick flower beds, fences, all of that. I have that in me also, and it's changed. I can't get down on my knees in the same way. I can't lift in the same way. And yet I still, I feel excited doing those things. Oh, that's what it was. There's a physicality that is just real with body. And there's some kind of like deeply embedded, I don't know what to call it, emotional attachment to, in the oversimplified way, that productivity narrative that actually doesn't serve. Or let me reframe it, because that's what I like to do. I'm so crazy productive, but in different ways. I bring a clarity that I didn't have 20 years ago. I bring some words and some diction and all of that I didn't have 20 years ago. I bring some courage that I didn't have 20 years ago. And yet still, oh gosh, if I feel like if I haven't been productive today, that lingers in me. I'm trying to mature that. Now I'm speaking personally. I think it's a much broader story. Okay, let me pause again. Pick up the spoon.
I'm thinking about, the little boy and the old man, or the little girl and the old woman, and the whole idea that time is a construct. It's an illusion. And so all of that, I love imagining this, that like all of that is right here, right now, in this present moment. And we carry not just the child with us, but we carry the future self with us as well. And lately, one of my practices has been about writing from my future self, writing notes to me from that future self. I find it really powerful, in a way, to do that and to just know that it's all here, all right now. And we have created these constructs that it's a different time, it's a different person, it's a different phase, it's a different whatever, but it's all here, even as we can witness it in our own journey or on the outside of us. So I feel like there's a lot of power and healing in embracing all of that within this right now. And then I think that this notion of productivity is a really interesting one, and especially if we mix it up a little bit with artificial intelligence and the conversations that Jerry and I have been in with a lot of people. One of the possible greatest benefits of artificial intelligence is that it will be productive for us and speed up a lot of processes that require time and energy, but are repetitive and can be refined and leave humans to higher value. I'm going to say work, but I'm going to say higher value experiences and exchanges with people. Doesn't necessarily have to be work. I get this notion of, was I productive today? I sometimes have to go back and go, you know what? I did two like really cool things. I completed work on a keynote that I was going to do, and I started work on the webinar that Jerry and I are going to do. And if those are the only two productive things that I did in the day, that might be enough. Because then how's the rest of the day spent? Also, I think you guys need to do yoga, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of I think that's kind of what I have at the moment.
Well, I'm gonna follow down Tennyson's path a little bit here and on a few things that you sparked for me. In no particular order other than this just how it's going to go. One of the things on this physicality piece, one of the things that has always brought me great joy is that sort of body tired, body satisfaction kind of thing from doing a project where you're out there and you build all day long, or you do this all day long or that all day long. And it's almost like you're in some Zen phase. When you're laying bricks, you don't think about anything really, almost nothing. You just, are these straight? This, that. I miss that. I just miss, when had it last summer at Kathy's house when we split wood all day long for a couple of days, and you're just, your body tired, but you just feel good, I think anyway. And, I'm going to lament that not happening as much as it used to. In this sort of phase thing, one of the things that I've had to adjust for me, and I find joy in it is with my son and son-in-law, being with them as adult men and doing things with them that they can do that I can't do. And we're about to do something in a little remodeling project in my house that my son-in-law is going to help me with because he's done it 3 or 4 times and I've not done it. Or Dustin coming over and helping me with some technology stuff that I just screw it all up, and he's just like figures it all out in a nanosecond, and so that sort of adult relationship is delightful, and I see it in Kathy's kids and Jacob and Spencer and the interactions there, and it emerging in Shasta that these are adult men, and in a way they're my peer. Because we're going to go out and, like last summer, Dustin and I rebuilt my steps, that kind of stuff. But they're also, I want to say phase shifting, which is a play on code switching. So, or phase switching is I can watch them be that 8-year-old playing with their kids. And so I delight in that. And, it's a little harder for me to be that 8-year-old playing with my grandkids now, but I watch and I say that for their partners too, is that they can be in those moments of phase of child-like behavior because they want to play with their kids in a way that meets the kids where they are, or in a more of a teenage behavior or whatever. And then but kind of one of the last things I want to say about going through all these phases is I think I could have gone through the phases that I went through in my life better if I'd have been more grounded in myself. If I'd have just sort of been a little happier with who I was. And if I had stopped chasing something, whatever it was that I was always chasing, and some of it might have been productivity and economic success, some of it might have been social success in high school or whatever, who knows? But I think when you're grounded in who you are, the phases are what they are. They're just life rolling on in a way. And for me, An important thing is that um, Kathy helped me become grounded in myself. It's late in life. And so I like who I am. And I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I'm very happy with who I am. I like who I am. And Kathy played a big role in that becoming happy with who I am. And so I'm not chasing anything anymore. I'm just being. Certainly I want to be productive at times and do stuff and contribute to the world in different ways, but I'm not chasing it. It's that agency thing that I think Kathy said, but yeah. So, the last little thing is I just hope that my kids and my grandkids can grow their capacity to be grounded within themselves in good ways. And I believe that that's happening, and I see it in Kathy's kids too. But I think that that's just be happy with who you are, instead of chasing something that's who you're not. So I'm complete.
So, Tennyson, I was laughing at productivity because I had to do the exact same thing. Um, and I didn't stop until the universe and my body led me to an extreme health crisis collapse. And then I had no choice but to accept that I couldn't do what I did before. And of late, I've decided that my primary job is to be a cheerleader for people I see who have no notion of their value. I have stated that I want to be the Dorothea Lange who was the photographer who took all the photos of people in the Depression and the Dust Bowl years, the nobody people. I've started writing poems for people who think they're nobody. A woman who runs this little market near me who is doing everything she can and she never stops. And I was struck by something she said to me. So I wrote a poem. And when I went the next time, I gave it to her in an envelope. And she's like, "What's this?" I said, "It's for you. Don't read it now." So then 2 weeks later, when I was there again, she yelled to her husband, "Hey, here she is, that woman," and I had captured her because I recognized things in her about me of being frugal because you had to be, but then it becomes part of your life. And you don't change because it's worked. So you just keep on doing it. And it is such a little thing for me to do because it doesn't take much time. And it's nothing related to money. It's nothing related to accolades or accomplishments. It's just paying attention and providing some sort of mirror or feedback that says, "I see you and you are amazing." And everybody cries. My one friend said, "No one's ever written a poem for me before." And I'm like, "Okay, you are 75 like me, and no one's ever written a poem for you before. Well, now you have one, and you deserve one." Because I am grounded and content and can pay attention now. That's one of the advantages of slowing down physically. And initially I was like, this is not fair, blah, 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 but it's given me a space to be of value to people in ways I never would have seen before. So I'm grateful now that I got hit upside the head and had to slow down.
Cool. In sense of our timing today, what if we do one more round that is just any last words by way of checking out or aha-ing together? And then we can come back. I'll do the last voice to send us out. Cool?
Cool.
In a checkout way / noticing way for me, there's a little tie back to what you were saying, Kathy, about generational trauma, the way that can live generations forward and behind. And I want to, it's all part of the who am I question that I carry a good chunk of. I want to put the generational joy in there too. So, my father died when I was 14. That's a big story in my life. And I had an aunt who knew my dad well, same age group kind of thing. And when I was at that 20-something age, she looked at me and she, with kind of tears in her eyes, brings tears for me right now, she said, "You're just like your dad. He was really sweet."
Wow.
I think there's something that carries, I just want to embrace that. Something feels clear for me now that we've spoken a bit. When I talk about these phases of boy and teen and young man and sort of acknowledging all of them, the people that I have loved so much in my life are people who can move between those with a little bit of consciousness. Right now we're going to be silly boys. And in a heartbeat, we can change to very serious men. I love that kind of shift. I'm also just very moved, Jerry, by the story that you shared of you and Kathy. So you feeling more grounded in yourself, not chasing. That is part of my story that is opened with Dana. I feel like I am wanting to be conscious of that or aware of that or accepting of that. So I feel like I have some version of that. All of those things stir for me with a kind of, keep thumping on my heart here just a little bit. Thank you for today's conversation.
I kind of go to that place too about being grounded. And when we're grounded, we're more present. And more present means more in the moment, in the present moment. And so there's a little bit of that. I was thinking about practices, and my 7-year-old grandson has a ADHD diagnosis, and he is on medication for that. And he also has been learning practices for that. And one day he was teaching his 5-year-old sister how to be in her body and present, and offered some thoughts about meditation as it shows up in a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old, which I think is like amazing when we talk about we're being called into a different time. That didn't really happen when I was that age, and it didn't happen when my kids were that age. So there's that. Or also the last time I was at Jerry's place, and his grandson was having a bit of a panic attack or something. And that's where we ended up, was talking about, he showed me a practice, a butterfly hug practice that he was being taught to help him stay in his body and not so anxious. So there's that. I love the idea of intergenerational joy. Yes. Why not? of course we could do that. And then I think the last thing is this being seen, and the acknowledgement of that and how powerful that is for people. And one of the when we do circle practice and we talk about the power of listening, there's two favorite phrases that I use around listening. One is about when we change the quality of the listening, we change the quality of the conversation, and that's even more important these days. And then the other one is when we listen well enough, we can listen a person into being. And people often pause at that and they need to have it repeated, but it is so freaking true. And that's a gift we can all give each other and someone else.
Well, what's kind of spinning around for me at the moment is sort of stories. And because we were talking about, generations here. So I have favorite stories of my two grandfathers. And one also relates to my dad. And I do wonder a little bit about what stories my kids or grandkids may tell about me. But the story that always sticks in my mind about my grandfather Gordon is he wasn't going to inherit a farm. The oldest son in the family would get the farm. So he said, well, what am I going to do? And he looked around and he said, well, what will people always need? They'll need a haircut. So he went to barber college. He left home in North Dakota and went all the way down to Omaha, Nebraska to go to barber college. This was the practical grandfather with the spray around the back and everything. But he told me, just thinking about that story, what will people always need? I was careful and thoughtful about it. My grandfather Nagel left home when he was 18. He left Iowa and came to North Dakota and never looked back. He went left and worked hard and rented farmland and, anyway, 18 and away he was gone. But one day when I was in as a high school age, I played my grandfather and Grandma Gordon had a record player, and so Nagel, and I played the song Wooly Bully by on their record player, and my dad got sort of upset about that and started to scold me about the music because it was horrible rock and roll music. And my grandpa looked at him and said, leave him alone. You were no angel yourself. Well, turns out he wasn't. And my grandfather Gordon once said, when they got married, my mom and my dad, my grandfather Gordon said, I never thought they'd make it because your dad was so wild. And yet, once he got married and had me, the wildness went away. There's lots of wild stories I've come to learn, putting somebody's cow up in the haymow of their barn and other things, putting a manure spreader on top of the grocery store in town. I mean, they apparently had a lot of fun. But those are little snippets of stories that live with me, and I remember, and they bring me that intergenerational joy you mentioned, Tenneson, of connection. And so I'm sure there will be stories that my grandkids will remember, and I don't need to create them. They'll come naturally in their own way, in their own time, and in their own memories as they emerge. But I just love this opportunity to remember. So I'm good.
I'm struck by the ways that communication is so much bigger than we recognize most of the time, that there's like auras or radiance that's around questions. And of late, I've become attuned to pay attention to those more so than the words. And so I don't answer questions normally anymore. I answer the question that's never been asked. But what I perceive, think, intuit, know is the real question. And I was reminded of how to do that better. I don't remember who. In the last 24 hours, somebody said listening from the belly.
Mm.
And that's what I learned to do in playback theater, was you would listen to the story with no context, no experience of a complete stranger, but you knew in your belly how they felt. And so you acted from that source. So for me, this new way of being grounded is connecting me pretty regularly with source. And if I had to get it, if I couldn't get it till I was 75, I am very grateful that I got to live this long to get it.
Hmm.
Because I think that is the most important work I've ever done.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Tenneson. I'll go back as a way of closing us out. I'll go back to where I started with this developmental imperative. That might mean a lot of things. I think it includes conversations like this.
Mm.
And on a birthday, Wednesday, 63, I feel like this is a gift to dip into this pool together. Thanks for joining today. Thanks for listeners. Come again. Jump in with us.